Welcome back to the Middle Tech Podcast. Hope everyone had a great weekend. Over the past week, we saw some big stories coming out of Apple introducing their new high-yield savings account, which is a really big deal both in the tech space and in the fintech space. And then we also had that Starship launch from SpaceX that ended in a big explosion, but was still looked at as a big success.
Super exciting.
Yeah, so we're going to be diving into both of those stories. But you have a good weekend? Did you have a good week?
It's a good Kentucky weekend. Went to Keeneland.
Yeah.
Went out to Henry Clay last night, drank some bourbon.
It's a good Kentucky weekend. Well, cool. Before we dive into these stories, just as always, a reminder to please subscribe to our channel. Follow us on all socials at MiddleTechPod. And before we dive in, we just want to get a quick word from our sponsors.
MiddleTech is presented by KY Innovation, the Kentucky Cabinet for Economic Development's Office of Entrepreneurship. KY Innovation is currently accepting applications for its SBIR STTR Matching Funds Program. Kentucky's program is a national trendsetter for providing critical non-dilutive capital to support the high-tech research, development, and commercialization of novel ideas within the Commonwealth. SBIR matching funds have directly contributed to the creation of more than 700 jobs, more than 200 patents filed, and more than $160 million raised in private follow-on funding into dozens of companies relocating to the state. The matching funds application window is open through April 24th. To apply and learn more about support services for companies that want to explore SBIR STTR grants and contracts, visit kyinnovation.com/SBIR. MiddleTech is sponsored by Bolt Marketing. Take your website to the next level with a website that's built to work. At Bolt Marketing, they're revolutionizing websites for small businesses that are affordable, customizable, and hassle-free. Whether you have a construction company, a boutique clothing store, or you own a hot yoga studio, they have options for you. Click the link in our show notes to explore their marketing options that can transform your marketing and grow your business. And as a personal note, Bolt Marketing built our website, and they were awesome to work with throughout the entire process. We highly recommend working with them.
All right, so for this first story, we have some big news coming from Apple, who is getting deeper into the fintech space and into the financial services space, now offering a high-yield savings account that is yielding 4.15% APY, which is 10 times the national average that you can get from a typical savings account. So, Evan, let's dive into the story, give us some of the high-level details, and then let's talk about the implications of this.
Yeah, so Apple, over the last 10 or so years, has really been trying to diversify away from solely being a hardware company. So they've been introducing a lot of subscription services, and now they're getting into the banking space, so the fintech space. Super exciting. They've been, over the last about 9 years now, releasing, like I said, banking products. So in 2014, they released their Apple Pay, which allowed you to pay merchants through Apple. Then in 2019, so 5 years later, they released a card, which was basically done with, Goldman Sachs as well. And that was basically just a normal card, credit card management, cash rewards program. So that was pretty typical. And then Apple Cash came out, which allowed people to send money back and forth to each other, so peer-to-peer payments. Then earlier this year, they announced Apple Pay Later, which is a play on the buy now, pay later kind of trend that was going on, which Affirm and Klarna really did well. And so Apple's, again, pushing into all these different products. And then finally, they kind of completed the whole banking stack lately with a savings account, which, as Logan said, has about 4.15% interest return. So that's pretty damn good.
That's substantial.
Yeah. So they're really standing out here. But the main thing that gets me excited is they've built the whole stack for banking. So somebody, if they wanted to, could just do all of their money management through Apple and have it highly integrated with the rest of their health, their phone, everything that Apple does well. It's all very integrated. So they've done a good job.
Yeah, I mean, you can definitely see this kind of master plan to get more into the financial services space playing out, since they released kind of their first foray into it back in 2014. We were texting back and forth with Adam. He sent us this article when it came out, and I think one of the things that just makes the most sense to me, and I think will really make this a popular feature for Apple users, is you already are so familiar, so many of us are so familiar with Apple's user interface and using Apple products. So now to have, a financial product that is going to have the same user interface and the same ease of use, I think is going to make this just a really widely adopted product, and one that super exciting to know that you can get 4.15% return. That can't be overstated. That is 10 times, I guess, what the average is for the interest rate that you can get on a typical savings account. So not only is that significant for consumers, but that's also going to have ripple effects throughout the financial industry, you have to think, as banks are going to have to compete with that now.
Yeah. I mean, if you got $5,000 in the bank, you're going to get a little over $200 every year in that interest. So that's great. Again, I think that they're diversifying away from hardware, and this is a way to get people into a really sticky environment. Apple's traditionally, people stay with Apple because of their user experience, but more and more when they roll out subscriptions and they roll out banking, it makes it a lot harder to leave their ecosystem. And so this is just another part of their ecosystem, which has become massive. So I'm an Apple customer. I love Apple. Their wallet, where they integrate all of these services into one, is fantastic.
Yeah. And to preface this is not any sort of financial advice or investing advice, but I've slowly been investing in Apple over the years, and you have to think that they're just going to continue to dominate in the space. You're seeing them expand into financial services, like we said. They've obviously got the hardware thing kind of nailed down. I'm sure they're going to continue to innovate there. But I think what I'm most excited about, and what I'm kind of theorizing Apple is going to head into, and what you and I have talked about a little bit, is Apple getting into this AI game. I think you mentioned, maybe you can speak to this a little bit more, them developing a chip that would allow a lot of these AI systems to run on your device, so you're not having to access the cloud and send data back and forth to a server to be able to access AI services, but being able to have AI built into an iPhone and have that tightly integrated with your messaging, your email, your calendar, all the things that you do, that you use Apple products to do. I think that's what I'm most excited about, and that's where I think Apple is just going to continue to be one of the dominant players in the field for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, and it's all private. So while they're integrating all of this tightly into their devices, all of that comes back to privacy. A lot of the decisions they make from a hardware perspective and from a software perspective, especially around encryption, tokenization of sending data back and forth between products and within their ecosystem and outside of their ecosystem, all of this comes back to having a highly personalized experience that's very private, and they're dominant in that. They do a great job of that. They're known to be people trust Apple, the brand, so they're going to trust them with their finances now.
Yeah. Anything else to add to that story before moving on to talking about Starship?
Nope.
Cool. So now, this past week on 420, which is just so appropriate for Mr. Elon Musk, Starship had its first launch. So this is the largest rocket to ever be launched. A lot of people are talking more so about the explosion of that launch, which was largely to be expected. Success to them was just getting off the launch pad for the most part. So to start this story and start talking about this, I want to share our screen and just kind of go through the size of Starship and the significance of Starship. And there's all sorts of different points to talk about with this story and different dynamics around this launch. But let's just kind of start by talking first about Starship itself. So on SpaceX's website here, and just to begin by talking about like the overview of Starship. So I just wanted to read this point that's on their website here. So Starship plus the Super Heavy rocket, so you can kind of see the two stages of it here, collectively referred to as Starship, represent a fully reusable transportation system designed to both carry crew and cargo to Earth orbit, the Moon, Mars, and beyond. Starship will be the world's most powerful launch vehicle ever developed, capable of carrying up to 150 metric tons, fully reusable, and 250 metric tons expendable. And we're also going to share that graphic that we created showing how big it is kind of next to Fifth Third building. But the thing I want to really call out about what I just said there is the amount of tonnage that it can take to orbit, because that's going to be what I want to dig into a little bit more at the end of the story, because that's a really significant part of this. So again, here you'll see the Starship, the upper stage, the lower stage, both of these are fully reusable, which is crazy. And then it's powered by these just incredible 33 Raptor engines. So if you got to watch that launch, you got to see kind of that power on display. So sliding over to this graphic here that Middletech created when Starship was first in the news, for any Lexingtonians that look up at the big blue building downtown, Starship is roughly the exact same size, which is just crazy to think about that whole building like lifting off the ground, and doing what they've done.
When you stand next to that building and you look up,
you're
like, wow, this thing's as tall as that. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, it makes you realize the significance of it. But going on and talking just a little bit more about some of the details around this story. So first off, the reason it was being called a success, this launch, is because it did clear the launch pad, it cleared the beach. It flew for about 4 minutes, before the automated systems kicked in and detonated, essentially exploded the rockets. And the reason it did that is because the stages did not separate, which was unintended. But that's still a huge success for them to get off the launch pad and collect all that valuable data and experience around launching this massive rocket. So all in all, it's going to be looked at as a success from Starship's point of view. If you look in, we were talking about kind of the mainstream media, there's more of a negative tone with it. So we wanted to call out some of the not so good things around this launch. And that's largely just around like the sheer power of getting a rocket like this off the ground. So we showed those Raptor engines that power this thing. There are 33 of those massive engines, and it creates just an incredible amount of power to get this size of a rocket off the ground. And so some of the things that the media was reporting on, and rightfully so, this is important to talk about, is the destruction that launch caused at the launch site. So this is down in Texas at Starbase, where they launched this from. And some of the residents of the nearby city down there were just describing the debris that was cast, miles away in some cases. The sound of this thing is like truly terrifying. And I mean, that's to be expected when launching a rocket of this size. But I think it's just worth noting that, anytime we're trying to get something this large off the ground, we're basically, it's like detonating a massive bomb to get this thing to lift off. So there's definitely the conversation to be had around, the environmental impacts of launches, things like that. And I think that's something that needs to stay in the conversation. But I don't want to lose sight of the fact of how incredible it is just in terms of human advancement and our advancement towards, getting into space and being a multiplanetary species. This is just such a huge milestone that I think those risks and those consequences are worth bearing as we go through this kind of.
Well, and they also did a good job of building literally a brand new city that's pretty isolated away from normal population. They created Starbase, which is, housing all of these employees and giving them all kinds of amenities while allowing them to be isolated away from the public. So they had to basically rebuild a city from scratch in order to have, like you said, the safety measures around these crazy launches, and for their employees to not have to travel so far back and forth to get to that isolation. They just live there on site at Starbase. So, they've done some things around that front to help recruit talent.
Yeah, a couple other things just about like the scale of this launch. It also says, so the 33 Raptor engines left a literal crater in the concrete at Starship's launch pad. And when Starship exploded 4 minutes into its flight, the resulting detonation was so massive it was picked up on Doppler radar systems. So just to demonstrate the size of what we're trying to do here, I think is important. So now moving on to some of my thoughts. Do you have something you want to into that?
Go ahead.
Okay, so talking about the scale of this, I think is where the meat of the importance of Starship and of SpaceX really lies. So I want to reference an excerpt from a blog I read, probably 6 months ago that became really relevant when thinking about the story again. It was called Starship is Still Not Understood. And it really just talks about being able to get cargo and humans to space at scale. And so here's this excerpt that I just wanted to read from this. So it says, first it says, in fact, all space missions, whether robotic or crewed, historical or planned, have been designed with constraints that are not relevant to Starship. What does this mean? Historically, mission systems design has been grievously afflicted by absurdly harsh mass constraints, since launch costs to low Earth orbit are as high as $10,000 per kilogram, and single launches cost hundreds of millions. This, in turn, affects schedule, cost structure, volume, materials choices, labor, power, thermal guidance, all of that. The entire design languages and heuristics are reinforced at the generational level in service of avoiding negative consequences of excess mass. As a result, spacecraft built before Starship are a bit like steel weapons made before the Industrial Revolution, enormously expensive as a result of embodying a lot of meticulous labor, but ultimately severely limited compared to the post-industrial possibilities. So Starship obliterates the mass constraint and every last vestige of cultural baggage that constraint has gouged into the minds of spacecraft designers. A little bit of a long excerpt there. But the point in reading that is that what Starship is truly doing here is making it much cheaper to get things into space and being able to do it at scale. So where typical rocket launches, they're not reusable, they can only take so much tonnage into space, Starship is going to make it to where we can have essentially a conveyor belt into low Earth orbit to build bases on the moon,
to eventually get to Mars, all those sorts of things. So that's kind of the significance of Starship as it relates to this particular launch.
Yeah, allows for economies of scale.
Exactly.
Yeah,
that's what I was trying to say from that really long and drawn out excerpt. Any other thoughts around this launch, Elon's response to it, or anything else you want to add?
No, nothing I think of. I think it's just super exciting to think about the use cases of space. We're just now discovering, what's possible. There's all kinds of cool scientific discoveries happening and research being done. We talked to Space Tango several times on this podcast, which is based out of Lexington here. They're doing amazing things, and this will surely allow companies like Space Tango to get more experiments up into space so we can, learn more about ourselves and learn if there's things that can be done in space that improve humanity that we can't do here on Earth because of gravity. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, and maybe the last little bit to point out here is I feel like people are starting to fall into two camps of like, we should do space exploration and try to develop these technologies, or we should be focusing on the Earth. I just want to, I guess, take the stance personally of saying we can do both. I think it would be really silly not to dedicate some amount of our investment towards space exploration, because I feel like whether it's 50 years from now or whether it's 150 years from now, humanity is going to need to be a multiplanetary species. I think that's just the evolution of our species. So I'll close it out with that. Let's move on to AI Edge. So AI Edge, stories, tips, and topics for gaining an edge with artificial intelligence. So this time we have a story around Google, who has been an early pioneer in AI, but was recently kind of unseated by OpenAI. So talk a little about this story with Google's DeepMind and Google Brain merging.
Yeah. So, Google's in full-on panic mode right now since ChatGPT was released, and they have what seems to be a major, they've got a lot of catching up to do. They've got a lot to figure out, and so they have two teams there at Google right now. They've got the DeepMind team, which they acquired several years ago, and it's been running as an independent company within Google. And then they've got their Google Brain team, which is underneath the Google umbrella. And so they're now merging those two to bring the talent and resources together to speed up their development and research of AI. But also, this is a move to get closer to AGI. So those teams can now work closely together to get us to a future where there is AGI. So this was probably bound to happen. At some point they've got to bring the two together. But AlphaGo was known for their AlphaGo, or DeepMind was known for their AlphaGo challenge, where they overcame basically the best human in the world at the game AlphaGo, which was at the time considered one of the greatest AI challenges because of how complex that game is, and it requires creativity. And the AI showed signs of creativity and beat the best human in the world, which was at the time, again, a crazy feat. And so since then, they've been applying it to all kinds of things like biotech, and now they're going to do large language models. So this is pretty exciting for Google.
Yeah, just on the topic of Google kind of being in full-on panic mode right now on high alert, trying to make sure they don't fall too far behind OpenAI. I was texting back and forth with you and laughing about the 60 Minutes segment. So 60 Minutes, which is kind of more, I guess, geared toward an older demographic. So it might be people that are listening for the first time, learning about AI for the first time, and they're talking about the recent advancements in AI, and it was all Google. There was no mention of OpenAI, which I thought, one, was kind of comical and not super intellectually honest. But two, you have to think, I wonder how much Google paid to be the exclusive, we're the AI conversation here. So anyway, it's worth checking out that 60 Minutes segment that aired, I think, just last week. So you can go find that and watch that if you want to kind of see a one-sided take on the AI race right now. But I think we're going to continue to see Google go all out, trying to make sure they don't fall behind on this, because this is probably the race. This is the most important race they've ever been involved in. So moving on to tip of the week for AI Edge. You mentioned you had stumbled upon a cool website that had all sorts of helpful prompts. So do you want to kind of talk through what that shows and why that's a helpful tip for our listeners?
Yeah. So we can maybe figure out a way to share this with our listeners. But
put in the show notes.
Yeah. There are people now aggregating all kinds of prompts, and you can filter through them and find what you want to do with AI. And so one of them that we've been using now at Simba is SEO optimized blogs. So we'll share this prompt, but essentially it is copy and paste into ChatGPT. You put in your own company data, your company name, what keywords you want to include, and it'll write a perfect blog for you that's 100% original. So it's stuff like that. Go out, look for prompts on the internet. Like the tip of the week is just to go search for prompts. We'll try to link to this one, where there are pages and pages of ways you can use AI, and then you just have to copy and paste and then chat with the AI from there. And it's a really productive conversation, and it can output, value for you and your team. In our case at Simba, we want to rank highly in SEO, and that requires a lot of blogs, a lot of backlinks, and various other strategies. And so it's now really easy for us to write SEO optimized blogs very quickly. So that's, tip of the week. Go find some good prompts.
Yeah, that's funny you brought that up. I don't think we even had discussed this before you mentioned that was the tip of the week, but I've been doing something very similar for Sales River. So I basically made a Notion document where I took all the copy from our website about all the features and all the selling points and everything, and just put in a really well-formatted document that I could copy and paste really easy over into ChatGPT. And then you can just kind of change the front prompt, and you can say, hey, like for example, the one I was using this week, I wanted to write a LinkedIn post or just experiment with what I should put in one. And I put, you are a professional in the Medicare space that's attending this conference I'm going to. I'm trying to write a LinkedIn post. I'd like to write a post that really appeals to some of your pain points and things you care about. Here is all the information about our company. Copy and paste it in that little, all the copy from our website that I had formatted there. And it just nails it. Like, it's just so good at it. So I think that's a really great tip of the week. So that concludes our AI Edge segment. Now moving on to wrapping things up here. As far as our Spotlight series is concerned, no Spotlight series for this week. We're aiming to have the next one out with True Diagnostic in the coming week or two. And other than that, hope everyone has a great week. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.